How's it going, everyone? It's Tavi from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to talk about the Atlantic hurricane season, more specifically 3 disturbances that either have a chance of developing into a tropical storm or hurricane. We of course have one that's close to the United States that could make landfall as Tropical Storm Colin, and we have another tropical storm that is expected to develop into a hurricane, and another tropical disturbance that has a chance of developing. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin. I'll take a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook. So as you can see right now, we do have a disturbance just off the Texas coast, which currently has a moderate chance of developing, which is higher than what we've been seeing over the past several days, where the chance was more leaning on the low side. But now the chance is a little bit higher as the National Hurricane Center has detected a little bit more convection. And we of course have tropical potential tropical cyclone 2, which is expected to develop into a tropical storm and potentially a hurricane, and another disturbance right here. But first, let's take a look at Invest 95L, which is just off the Texas coast. And if I were to show you guys the water vapor imagery, you see that there isn't really much going on when it comes to convection. We do have a lot of thunderstorm activity happening right around the southeast area. However, this isn't associated with Invest 95L, as it's mainly associated with the stationary front that's located throughout the entirety of the southeast United States. This is an independent low pressure system right here, Invest 95L, and you see that not a lot of convection is going on. It does seem like the air pressure is low enough along the surface for a high amount of water vapor to rise up aloft and condense. So as a result, we aren't seeing a lot of thunderstorm activity, which certainly will limit its potential in developing into a tropical storm, because there just isn't enough lift, and this won't really have enough time over water to really organize itself to become an extremely strong tropical storm. But the chance certainly does exist because of wind shears currently very light over the area, and also of course the sea surf temperatures at this point in June are already more than warm enough to support for a tropical cyclone development along the northern Gulf of Mexico. And but the only thing that's really inhibiting it is just the lack of moisture, and the air pressure just isn't low enough to support for a high amount of lift. As you could, if we were to take a look at the current wind shear map, you see that Invest 95L is located right here. We do have strong wind shear just to the north of it, but it's expected to continue to move southward before taking a turn northward. And this strong wind shear you see right here is expected to continue to move westward, so the conditions should become more favorable within the next several hours once the shear begins to die down. What really will determine if this does develop into a tropical storm or not is really how fast it could organize itself, and it's very difficult to really determine that, to see when a low pressure system will develop a small and well-defined center of circulation, as that's always a key when determining when will a tropical cyclone form. It really needs a small center and closed center of circulation, and there isn't just a lot of lift or moisture in the atmosphere for this to have an extremely high chance of developing into a tropical storm. So there's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, taking a look at what the European model is stating when it comes to the amount of moisture, you do see that while there isn't necessarily a high amount of stable air, there isn't a ton of moisture either. Most of the moisture is relegated to the northeast of this low pressure system. And if I were to continue to move forward, the European model does acknowledge that there will be a low pressure system, but you see the air is fairly stable. And if the air is this stable, then we're less likely to see enough convection to really lower the pressure and enhance the wind speed to create a closed circulation along the surface. So it is definitely going to be one of those 50-50 chances that this does develop into a tropical storm. So make sure to keep that in mind along Texas. But whether this develops into a tropical storm or not, you need to prepare for the high possibility of heavy rain, especially towards the southwestern coast of Texas, closer to Houston, where you could maybe receive up to 5 inches of rain. This is going to be a weak tropical storm. I wouldn't even expect coastal flooding associated with this. Maybe a small amount of gusty winds if this does develop, but pretty much a primary threat will be the rain. So make sure to pay close attention to that. throughout the southwestern portion of Texas, as heavy rain associated with this low pressure system will be the main pretty much impact associated with Invest 95L. And this would become Tropical Storm Colin if this does develop. We have to wait and see. It has a 40% chance of developing, so we could be in for another quite active hurricane season with how many storms are developing pretty early and how many disturbances we're watching this early in the hurricane season. Now, taking a look at what the ensemble members are saying, you see pretty much they're all taking Invest 95L to make landfall in Texas, whether this develops into a tropical storm or not. So it seems like the eye will move over Texas, which will enhance the heavy rain, so keep that in mind. And the model intensity guidance, we have a decent amount taking this the tropical storm status, while a good amount also are not expecting this to develop into tropical storm. So there's really a 50-50 shot, I'd say, this develops into a tropical storm. But in Texas, keep in mind of the heavy rain threat, because if I were to show you guys the orange you see right here, that's over 5 inches of rain, and that's just to the southwest of Houston. And you see that a large area of the Houston metropolitan area should expect 3 to 5 inches of rain. So keep that in mind, because flooding is one of the leading causes of weather-related deaths in the United States. And even though this tropical storm is weak, it still definitely has a potential of bringing some heavy and flooding rain that you need to be aware of throughout Texas. But now let's take a look at potential tropical cyclone 2, which likely will become tropical storm Bonnie once we do see a closed circulation. If I were to show you guys the water vapor imagery, you do see that it's still fairly well organized. We do have a nice outflow along the northern portion of this storm, which shows that a lot of the air aloft is diverging. So that should encourage a little bit more convection as this continues to head for a westward. But you see that there isn't really a well-defined center of circulation. The thunderstorms are pretty scattered, with the majority of the convection occurring on the west side of the low pressure system. We need to see a little bit more convection around the center of circulation before we can consider this officially as Tropical Storm Bonnie. But it does have the wind speed to be considered that, just not a closed and well-defined center of circulation. But it is expected to happen. The wind shear should die down. I don't expect a lot of dry air to really inhibit this storm, so this should develop into Tropical Storm Bonnie and potentially a hurricane before landfall. Now, if I were to show you guys what the European model is forecasting at this time when it comes to this tropical storm, let's take a look at the humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. We do see that the European model does strengthen it a little bit, and you see that the European model takes the landfall somewhere, I'd say, close to the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. So it's going to be one of those close calls in both countries, especially if you're in the northern portion of Costa Rica. You need to pay close attention to this, because you could get impacted by potentially a strong tropical storm or hurricane. But taking a look at the mid-levels, the humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, we do see that while there is dry air to the north of it, it's expected to have a relatively small circulation, a point where it won't really absorb much of that, so it should have an open area to develop before landfall. And the GFS model also agrees with that, as we do see that the GFS model does expect even more moisture and a little bit of a stronger storm, and it's taking a southward track as well, close to the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. So in those countries, you need to pay attention, because heavy rain should be expected, maybe localized areas of up to 8 inches of rain and maybe even more. You need to pay very close attention to that. In terms of the wind shear forecast, we do see that the wind shear is expected to be relatively light. There is a little bit more wind shear than initially expected as there's this upper level high located just to the north of it, and you see the wind shear is moderate, which is the reason why this storm really didn't develop as fast as anticipated. The wind shear ended up being a little bit stronger than usual, but the computer models are still agreeing that the wind shear should die down by the time this reaches the southwestern portion of the Caribbean. So this is when most of the development should occur, and that's when we should see a more well-defined center of circulation for this storm to be considered tropical storm and potentially Hurricane Bonnie in the future. So I expect a strong tropical storm or a hurricane to make landfall. In terms of track, there isn't really much uncertainty at this point. I don't expect this to drift northward, maybe towards Honduras or even the eastern portion of the Yucatan Peninsula, as most likely this will make landfall in Nicaragua or Costa Rica, one of those areas, maybe a little bit more likely towards Nicaragua. So in those countries, you need to pay close attention to this. And you're probably wondering, how about the storm's future beyond Nicaragua and Costa Rica? What will this storm do? So if I were to forecast this, we do see that the GFS model does want to re-strengthen this into an Eastern Pacific hurricane, and the pressure does drop quite a bit. But the good news is that it stays mostly off the west coast of Mexico and the other Central American countries, such as El Salvador and the western coast of Guatemala. It's at least taking it further south enough to where it isn't impacting those areas along the west coast, which is definitely good news. So that's definitely something to keep in mind for Nicaragua and Central American countries, that this likely won't come ashore, which is definitely good news. Now, beyond this storm, we of course do have the potential for another tropical storm that could happen next week, but still uncertain. I'll keep you guys updated if the certainty does raise. And of course, we do have this tropical wave that's expected to move through the Caribbean that does have a possibility of developing. But it seems like if we were to take a look at the wind shear forecast, while the wind shear is expected to be relatively light, again, it might be one of those scenarios where the dry air might be too much for it to handle. So currently the chance of development is low. Now, take a look at the ensemble member forecast. You see that pretty much most of all the computer models are taking landfall towards either Nicaragua or the northern coast of Costa Rica, and we do see some strengthening occur. And a lot of the computer models take this offshore of the west coast, so that's something good news. And taking a look at the ensemble members, we do see pretty much all of them are expecting this to be at tropical storm status. In terms of wind speed, it is really just need to see that small center circulation, but this could become a hurricane, so pay close attention to that at landfall. Now, here's my forecast when it comes to potential Hurricane Bonnie and potential tropical storm Colin. As you can see, I'm expecting this to make Hurricane Bonnie to make landfall somewhere between Nicaragua and Costa Rica. If this were to develop into a hurricane, I think if it does develop into a hurricane, it'll be more on the low end side, right around 75 to 80 miles per hour. But even a strong tropical storm could bring major impacts, especially when it comes to flooding. So don't underestimate it throughout Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And you see that for tropical storm Colin is expected to take northern track, as a landfall is more likely as a tropical storm. It's still around, I'd say, a 50-50 shot, a moderate chance of developing into tropical storm before landfall, but the chance certainly has risen from before. So I'm gonna say the chance of a tropical storm landfall is more likely. And of course, we need to take a look at this disturbance over the coming days. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.